David, to Bitcoin People, the inaugural, the initial, the very first podcast of hopefully a series that people will come and enjoy and feel a sense of community with, and with other Bitcoin people. David, you're from Perth. You and I originally met online in a trading group.
Correct.
And you very kindly put your hand up when I put the word out on Twitter and said, hey, anyone want to be interviewed for this? And you were the sucker for punishment that came up.
Yes.
I'm sure I'm in that. And the purpose of this is to, as we were just chatting about before, and as I've kind of put out on Twitter, is really just to create a sense of community with other Bitcoin plebs, and to get to know one another and go, do we have values in common the way that I suspect? And what are other Bitcoiners like, and where do they live, and how does Bitcoin fit into their life and their philosophy and their values, and what do they want from this? That's really kind of what I'm interested in, is what are your hopes and dreams when it comes to Bitcoin? Because I feel like we've got a lot riding on this.
Yes.
A lot of us are quite, there's a high stakes, there's a high emotional involvement in this thing.
Definitely.
So perhaps we can start, and I think the easiest way to start is to get a sense of your background. So I'm really curious as to what brings people into this space. How do we end up here? What would the background, what made us who we are?
Yep.
And how does that feed into, as we get through the conversation a little bit? So I'll start with kind of a bit of background and how you feel, who you feel you are, and where you think that kind of came from, how you became you.
Sure thing.
And then we'll kind of leverage from there. So tell me a bit about yourself, David. Where'd you come from, and what do you think are kind of some of the formative events, influences that made you who you are today?
Sure. So I grew up I was born in Perth technically, but I was immediately taken to Eneabba, which is a small country town about 3 hours north of Perth. It's primarily based around mining, so there's a lot of mine sites there. My father was working on the mines at the time. So for the first 6 years, I grew up there in a country town environment, which I reflect on that I really love, because I love being in the city, like I'm a city boy now, but I've got sort of that grounding of being in nature, chasing, tadpoles in the winter and things like that, picking up frogs, walking around in the summer on 45, 50-degree roads. Mum didn't put shoes on us because that was the easiest way to stop us running away very far. And so, and just being in the bush, even having, what are they? Like the thorny lizards, like where it's really spiky, you can't even pick them up, like just cool stuff like that, which I appreciate. And just having a small community, which I'm still connected to, like just old friends that have been around for that long. So that's where I grew up for the first 6 years, but then we moved to back up to Perth into a suburb called Lesmurdie, which is in the hills of Perth. And so in terms of stuff that made me or shaped me, I think that was a big part of it. The country town living was great, but then when I moved cities, I kind of lost friends, because this was back in the late 80s. There was no Facebook or anything like that. So there were connections I lost, had formed new connections, but I was not good at forming them. I was quite a shy person. And so I go into situations where I actually ended up being bullied a lot in school. But the way that actually helped me in life is I didn't quite understand people. I was kind of naive with people and behavior types and things like that. So they actually just kind of led me on a quest of trying to understand people, which I feel I do pretty well now, which I'm actually quite grateful for. Another piece of that lended itself to that into my career was in high school, going to photography. My sister was doing it, and I'd just see her when I was in my classroom window looking out. She'd be walking around school with a camera in her hand. I was like, that's cool, you get to get out of class. So I literally, that was my first thought. So in year 9, I started doing photography as like an elective, but then really enjoyed it, in the darkroom, doing the processing, lots of black and white, So I continued that through year 10, 11, 12. And as I was doing 11 and 12, I started getting awards for it and thought, hey, maybe this can be my career path, because it was either that or computing, because I was into my computing at that time. I grew up with the beginnings of the internet. But I decided to go down the photography path, and so I went to TAFE in Perth for photography. That was the better course. There was TAFE and 2 universities, but the universities were more conceptual, ideas based, whereas TAFE was more practical, like how to actually get stuff done. So I went down that, did that 3 years full time. Through that, got to work on projects of publishing books, which was separate to TAFE, was like an extracurricular thing, but it ended up sending me to China to do printing and things like that. And in terms of the bullying, the photography was actually a good way for me to understand people, because I got to just kind of observe people through the lens, start interacting with them, start, try and get people to smile and things like that, or pose in different ways. So it was actually like an entry for me to be confident and to deal with people more. So when I started getting into business, I'd have to shoot events. I'm shy, I don't want to deal with 30 or 50 or 100 people, but I had to. So, having the camera, like cameras are authority to boss people around. As soon as someone's got a camera in their hand, they can start telling you what to do. And for some reason you do it. It makes no sense. So that was actually a good learning experience for me. But with coming out of TAFE, I landed a job immediately. I didn't want to be a photographer with my own business at all. So I started working with another guy, Wilfred. And over the course of 4 years, we became very close. He trusted me, I trusted him, and I actually ended up becoming a half owner of his business. And then later, when he retired, a full owner. So I was in that business for 15 years as employee, manager, I guess, and then stepping into the role of owner. So I had this full evolution of not even wanting to own a business to suddenly, being the head of it, having 22 staff. We photographed a lot of schools, sporting clubs, events. So, dealing with lots of things all the time. It was just very, very busy. And to the end where I ended up selling the business, because it was time for me to get out. I was kind of over it, and that was 5 years ago. And I accidentally retired, and this will come to the Bitcoin thing a bit later, but I accidentally retired in the sense that I had a slow payout over 4.5 years, and I've just slowly stretched that money further and further, which has then led me into wanting to keep doing that, trading and investing and all that. So that's the the 5-minute digest of how I got to where I am now.
Okay, so a couple of questions obviously coming up.
Go for it.
The first one is, I know you mentioned in our kind of pre-interview correspondence, you said something about that very first town that you lived in outside of Perth was a mining town. Correct. So I'm curious about, did you learn anything about mining? Were your parents involved in mining in some way, shape or form? How did that?
Well, Dad was he was a rehabilitation officer for the mine. So he had a background in environmental consulting or environmental rehab, where he was never, I wouldn't call him a greenie because he was too practical. He was never an ideologue. He was more just in the mines needed, once they finished digging up the dirt and they were done with it, they need to put it back as close as they could to the way it was. So his job was to get in and do that, because they're doing mineral sands mining, which is all shallow. It's not where it was shallow depth. They just raise the land, dig a bunch of dirt, put it all back down again, and then, put trees over it. So that was his job, was to put it all back together after it was done.
I love hearing about kind of just things people do that I would never imagine existed as a job.
And so my sisters kind of follow that a little bit. My eldest sister's a hydrographer. I've got 2 sisters. The eldest is a hydrographer, so dealing with water flows and things like that for creeks and rivers. And so she kind of followed a bit in the environmental path. My middle sister, both older than me, she actually worked for my father for a while when he had his own business later on in life. They were doing environmental accounting at that time, so seeing how much emissions companies put out, measuring it, quantifying it, and doing like an annual report in the same, something's popping up on my computer, doing an annual report to the government of what emissions they're putting into the atmosphere. So my sister worked in that. Now she does other things. So they kind of followed his path a bit. And I just went way off the beaten track and did something completely different. And my mother when we were in that small town, she didn't work. She was raising us. But as we got older, I think when I was probably age 10 or so, she started to get back into the workforce, doing catering, cooking kind of jobs. That was her forte before then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So would you be able to identify what you think were some of the formative values you grew up with? Like are there values that the whole family have in common? It certainly sounds like it. What
We're
are the
pretty well.
characteristics almost of your family, or the values of your family, or do you feel you're all very different? Have you grown up, have you accumulated different values or evolved different values since those early days?
I think we have to a degree, but I guess the core value that's held us together, we're not super tight. We're not in each other's lives like on a daily basis,
Yeah.
which suits me fine. And it kind of suits us all fine. Like both my sisters, I just catch up when I need to catch up, and we're there for each other when we need to be there for each other. But if we're all fine, then we're just off doing our own thing, which is kind of nice. So like even with Dad's, Dad had the vague idea that if we wanted to work in his business or take it over, that was great. But if we didn't, that was also great.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a relaxed attitude with my parents where they were never trying to force us into anything, like to live out the life that they wanted. It was more they were, helping us along the way, but just guiding us and supporting us in the path we want to take.
Yeah.
Which I feel, and it kind of still continues today, like, going from photography to then sort of semi-retiring to, went to Bali for a while and tried a retreat center there. Like I've never had a big resistance from my parents. They'll question me, but it's not questioning for the sake of condemning. It's just questioning, like, just to tease out, is this what you really want? Okay, great, I'll go do it. And so I'd say that's, in terms of a key value, it's probably just we've got a nice supportive nature between us, but without trying to push each other in any particular way.
Nice. So just expand a little bit on that retreat center in Bali. What was that all about, and where did that fit into the career progression?
The diagram, yeah. So
the photography business.
Yep. Yeah, when I sold the photography business, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I thought I'll just take 6-12 months off, just travel the world and enjoy myself, just let myself decompress from working 80-hour weeks for 15 years. So I did that, did a bit of travel around the world, walked across Spain, climbed a mountain, did these fun things, lived in Melbourne for a while. And it was when I was in Melbourne, I briefly worked as a travel agent there for 6 months, just because I wanted to see behind the scenes of the travel industry, because I've always enjoyed traveling. So I just wanted to see what happens, behind, just to know about it. But while I was doing that job, I had visited Bali previously and I enjoyed my time there. I was there for maybe 3 or 4 months. And I thought, I really want to do something there, but I didn't know what. But being a travel agent, I was exposed to all kinds of ideas. And I thought, actually doing a retreat center would kind of be cool, because I always enjoyed personal development. When I was in my business, I was always doing things to develop my mind separate to, just business. It was actually, developing myself as a person. But I never wanted to be a practitioner in any of the things that I studied. I didn't like that one-on-one kind of delivery, but I did love being a part of it. So I thought, okay, this is a way that I could support that happening. So have a retreat center, have teachers come in with their students to teach whatever they teach, and I can be the logistics and the back end behind it. Because with dealing with photography, and especially school photography, we're shooting 1,000 kids in a day. That's not a photography exercise, that's a logistics exercise. The photography is just kind of, in the background of that. And so I became very good at logistics. It's essentially event management every day, dealing with 1,000 kids. So I thought, okay, I've got that skill of being able to understand how to run an event. This is a slightly different kind of event, but I understand it. I'm good with customer service. So yeah, I want to contribute in that way, being the person behind the person, have the venue there, support them in whatever the teacher needs so that they can focus on what the students need.
So it's a big jump. Like, it's a big jump to go from working in your own business that you've already got a grounding in photography, like you worked for someone else, then you worked for yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of familiarity about that. Then you got a job, and that's kind of, in the travel industry. So other people are looking after stuff there for you to some degree. So
yes,
then you go and live in Bali and buy or create a business in Bali.
Yeah.
That's a big, like that's quite a high risk.
Sort of.
You know,
so
like
I
would find that scary.
I'll paint the picture of how I rationalized it, because I had the same thing. I was like, far out, going to a foreign country, starting a business, like that seems extreme. But the way I rationalized it is I started looking at what skill sets I developed over those 15 years that were applicable to it. I became very good at dealing with documentation in terms of legalities, taxes, all of that kind of thing.
Right.
Hated it, but I became very good at it because I, was dealing with a couple $1 million business, 22 staff, had to, figure stuff out. Became good at that, became very good at customer service, both on the retail and on the wholesale end. So retail, doing school photography, we were dealing with parents, which is very different to dealing with the school itself.
Right.
There's like a retail wholesale
element. Basically.
Yeah, it's like business to business and business to consumer. So I was good at both of those. So I knew that'd be fine dealing with students. I'd be fine dealing with practitioners. I had a lot of experience in personal development. So I've done, probably 10 different courses with different people over the time, some quite in depth, some like 7-day, 12-hour-a-day marathons of different courses that I've been a student of. And some of those courses I also assisted on. So I got to see behind the scenes of those.
Yep.
So I had a understanding of practitioner concerns and logistics of running those kind of events. I did the travel agent thing because I wanted to understand more about the behind the scenes of travel. So in terms of getting the students and the practitioner to Bali and dealing with the logistics of what might go wrong with flights or bookings or, all that kind of stuff, I had an understanding of it all. And I'd briefly lived in Bali. I had that 4 months there, so I had a bit of an understanding of the culture and the people. I had a few connections there, both locals and expats. So when I start adding it all together, it's like I understand enough that this doesn't feel too risky. And fortunately, I had a Aussie partner there who had been there for like 30 years, and he helped initially with having a venue that I borrowed of his for a few retreats, and then we were together building a separate one, which we stopped because of COVID, but we were building a separate one. But he had been building property for 30 years in Bali. So when we talked about this, like that was, if I was personally doing it, that would have been super high risk because I know nothing about building, construction, any of that. I've never had an experience of it, but he had a lot. And he knew the landowners, he rented it for 30 years, he did with all the logistics of that. So part of it was going on faith in terms of, this could go really bad, but part of it's like, no, I've got a lot of skills to bring to this. So I'm comfortable enough to give it a go.
Good for you. And so there's lots of different things coming through, and it's really difficult to know which way to go with this, but I'm going to pick up the thread of the personal development.
Sure.
Because that's what led you to wanting to open a retreat centre. That was a value that had kind of come through. And so what do I want to ask around this? I guess I want to know, what was that calling inside you? Why were you pursuing personal development? What did you want to get from personal development, and where do you feel you're at with that journey now?
Well, I had absolutely zero interest in it at the beginning. Because the way it came about was when I was like 19-ish, I was still in sort of that shy phase. But as I was doing my photography studies, I was like, in probably like 5 years from now, this is going to be easy. So between here and there, I just have to like hold on and ride with it. And at some point in 5 years, I'll get to a point where I feel comfortable doing everything I'm doing with photography. And that is how it played out. I kind of just set that goal in my mind as a way of getting over the shyness of all the stuff I had to do and the people I had to deal with. And that kind of worked out where, between 19 and 25, I joined that business. I started shooting all these events, shooting portraits, shooting things I was uncomfortable with. I preferred shooting landscapes because that didn't involve people, but I ended up being in a people business. So that kind of naturally developed my people skills and things like that. When I was 25, I went to Vegas for a photography conference. I met a American woman there who I deeply fell in love with. It was just one of those love at first sight, beautiful things. So we started doing the, flying back and forth thing and lots of expensive phone calls before we had Skype and all those things.
Yeah.
Which was beautiful. But her and I going to about 8 months in, it just started to get a bit weird and a bit tense because when we met, she was separated but not divorced. We met, fell in love, but then she was still dealing with all that kind of stuff of being married and having to go through all the separation. So just our communication went from being this pure love, amazing, youthful vibrance to now being, oh, this is a bit crunchy. Now we're dealing with actual emotions and, all the stuff that you have to. So it was through that process, my business partner, I think he was my business partner at the time, he kind of saw all this going on. He was like, Dave, I think you might need to just start, getting a bit of support here, like looking at how you're thinking, because you don't seem to be enjoying life with this whole interaction that's going on and, living in 2 time zones, because often she was in America. And I was kind of just tense and kind of grumpy all the time because I'd always had the fancy of having the one, I'm a very romantic kind of person, but now there was just all this friction kind of getting in the way of it. And I was young and didn't have the communication skills to navigate all that. So there was a course that he did. And, over the weekend he went and did this thing. I didn't know what it was. On Monday, I saw him and he was just a very different person on the Monday, just very calm. He was an older guy. Normally he had old man syndrome, like he was just kind of scattered, kind of a bit wild. But on that Monday, he was just calm and grounded. And I was like, what did you just do? I was like, well, I kind of can't tell you the details. I was like, what do you mean? Like I was instantly outraged. Like, have you joined a cult? What's going on here? It's like, no. You might just want to, come check this out. I was like, okay. And I only said okay because I saw how he changed just so quickly to just being very calm compared to his normal state of being. So I went along to like the information night and I was like, okay, something's kind of resonating here in terms of talking about thinking the way you're thinking and maybe you're creating a reality that you're not enjoying. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. So he was like, okay, let's just sign you up. So we signed me up, but unbeknownst to me, he signed me up they had 3 programs. He signed me up for all 3 at the same time. So it was like a 2-day one, a 3-day one, and a 7-day one.
Oh, wow.
Which was interesting. But it was actually kind of cool because and we did it all through the business. Like he was just like, we'll put it through the business, whatever. I was like, okay. But I actually, leading up to the first one, I actually had a lot of resistance to it. Like it was coming up on, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so on like the Wednesday, I was like, I don't know if I can make it. I'm stressed, tired, blah, blah, blah. So I sent them a message saying, hey, yeah, I'm not going to make it. Can we just put it to the next one? And they're like, no, we don't work that way. I was like, what do you mean? They're like, read what you signed. We don't do refunds. We don't do exchanges. We don't do pushbacks. You're either coming now or if you come in the future, you're going to have to pay again. And so I was like, well, I'm not coming. So I didn't go. And they're like, that's fine. No refund, which pissed me off even more. But because of that, I didn't want to lose the other 2 courses because I think it was like $2,000 and then another $7,000 for the other ones.
Right.
A lot of money at stake. So I ended up signing up again, doing the second course, and that's just where my whole life shifted, because the basic intention of that course was to see how nothing that happened in life was ever a mistake, as in anything that I was caught up with, like especially with a relationship. And even I never had a bad childhood, but there was just sort of tension with my parents at that particular time in my life. So it's like just looking back at my whole life and seeing how everything actually happened the way it needed to for me to get where I was in that moment. And if any of it was changed, there was no way that I'd actually be where I was right now. And so that just going through a process, it's kind of a process you go through, but at the end of it, I was just grateful for everything that happened in my life. Grateful for the relationship I was in, even with all its drama. Grateful for the business that I was, going through in that growth. And so that kind of set me on the journey. And I did the first course, and I did the second, and I did the third. And I was enjoying thinking about how I was thinking, because prior to that, I'd always been curious about other people, but now I was actually having to really get into myself deeper and deeper and figure out, my behaviors and why I did certain things. And so that led on the path. So I did their courses, and I did courses through another supplier, then another one, bits and pieces, did stuff around health and fasting. So I got into the body more, which was really integrated it when I did a 14-day water fast. I was like, whoa, like I had a whole different level of understanding of my body and my mind and how they're all working together. I've done the cold bath thing with Wim Hof methods and the breathing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All kinds of things which have been super beneficial. I've been to Costa Rica and done ayahuasca there, which I've never been into drugs. I've only tried marijuana twice in my life.
Yeah.
And alcohol barely. Like I just don't drink or don't do anything. I like my mind too much. But I did ayahuasca.
How was that for you?
That was intense. That was 5 sessions and 7 nights.
Yeah.
So that was like, but it was all just this journey of understanding myself, really. And so that, because I appreciated that journey, that's kind of led me into the retreat center thing. It's like I've loved doing this for myself, and I've loved seeing other people go through it as well, even when I've helped facilitate, helped at the different events. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to support people in their journey, but again, be that logistics side of it versus being someone that, teaches and does the teaching myself. I'd rather support the teachers and what they do.
There's so much that I want to get into around
just talking with a fire hose here, it's just like dumping it on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating, and I kind of, I've been down some of that path myself. I'm also a little bit kind of mindful of time. So as we were saying before, it's this kind of juggling of really wanting to go deep, but also wanting to sort of get into the Bitcoin story, which is kind of primarily what this is all meant to be about. So I'm going to ask you, instead of deep diving into kind of each of those elements and what came out at each step of the way, as it were, who do you think you were before you went into all of that process, and who do you think you are now? Like, if you had to capture the essence or of the changes that have taken place through all of that, what was the starting point, and where's the current iteration of David?
I think before that I was pretty unaware. Like I was quite self-centered, but not in a trying to be way. I was just very focused on myself and my path, my journey, and what I was up to. But just in a logistical sense, like I was just doing stuff, like, just doing the photography, just trying to get here, just trying to be successful, just kind of thing. But I wasn't super conscious. I was just kind of in a very career focused state. And so even with my relationships, I wasn't really aware of where they were up to, what they wanted in life, all that kind of thing, or with my family or friends or anything. I was very focused. What doing all the stuff helped me do, and I think because of that focus, I can't burn bridges because I didn't quite understand necessarily where others were at, and so therefore I got confused if people were suddenly out of my life. Like, hang on, why is this happening? Doing the course, and actually there's a small piece there. I used to, because of the bullying in school, I was always trying to impress people, so I'd find myself spending too much to impress people that I wasn't really connected with. I wasn't figuring out whether I really liked them or if they really liked me. It was more just I was on this merry-go-round of trying to be liked, but sabotaging myself. So after all of this, I guess I'm just more centered in who I am. Like I figured out how I like to operate in life, and not being apologetic for that, but being very communicative of, here's who I am. If you like that, let's hang out. If you don't like that, that's cool. Let's not hang out. Like, I'm not desperate for attention or for having people like me anymore. I'm just centered in who I am, and I just present myself honestly now about exactly who I am in life, like I'm doing with this talk. Like, this is who I am. This is what I've gone through. If we vibe, great. If we don't, that's okay as well. So it's just a very live and let live kind of space now.
And if you had to talk, if I were to ask you then about beliefs, so I'm thinking now specifically about ayahuasca, and it can give you insights into not just yourself and how you operate and your behaviors, which is if I were to put it in the category of maybe cognitive behavioral or kind of psychological, whereas ayahuasca is well outside of all of that.
Of course.
It gives you insights potentially into the nature of the universe rather than just kind of your own humanity.
Yep.
Was there any change of belief system or understanding about the world that came out of that?
Yes, two parts. And I guess the other part how I've changed is I do understand other people a lot better. I can just, you know, if I'm watching someone for a few hours and their actions and what they're saying, I can kind of start to figure out, you know, a rough pattern of how they are, because I kind of see the human patterns, human behaviors more now about myself and about others, like I've been able to relate all together. So in terms of a more global context, when I'm seeing, you know, various dramas going on, I'm understanding just, I guess, patterns that are playing out in people. And that's something that I guess we've talked about in the investing, you know, there's all these big patterns that go on in terms of humanity and how, you know, goes through this phase and this phase and this phase. So part of me understanding investing has been part of me just understanding human behavior, because it's all just, you know, the markets are just human emotions rolling on. So I understand people's emotions. In terms of even bigger and more esoteric, I was atheist as a child. From age 10, I just decided to become atheist because I was in my religious classes and it wasn't making sense to me. I was like, no, this seems a bit weird in terms of what people were saying versus how they were behaving. It's like there's a disconnect. But when I actually did that first course, I kind of got a sense of what I see God is without any of the religion or the attachment of dogma or any belief system. And it's just like, okay, there's just something big going on here. And it actually does seem kind of organized, and that's okay. Like I can just accept that without having to pray to it or worship it or any of that. It's just like, I'm not keeping my heart beating here. Something set this up, whatever that something is. That's pretty cool. And like that's as far as I go with. I understand why people get into the different faiths and things like that. I don't get into any of. I get into all of them. I like all of them, but I'm just looking for the commonalities between all of them, like the universal parts of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it's given me. It's like I've got this base structure of understanding how life works. I'm just seeing how other interpretations of life kind of fit into that and how they feed together, you know, whether someone's this religion or that religion, or whether they've got no religion but they've got spirituality. I'm just saying, okay, how are all these things actually common?
Yeah.
Especially when they don't think they are. I'm just trying to look at the commonalities.
So it gives you almost, so do you feel like, and I'm going to kind of steer us towards Bitcoin and trading now.
Yeah.
And those are two different things, because there's kind of Bitcoin as a commodity, and then there's, or a monetary system.
Yes.
And a protocol versus trading, which is, you know, a whole different kettle of fish altogether.
Sure.
So, and within that, we've got macro and we've got micro. I'm just going to hold fire. We may have to edit this bit out.
Yeah, you were talking about the macro and the micro is what you were saying.
Yeah. Okay, that's finished now. So let's just go into, first of all, from a personal point of view, do you feel like that gives you some sense of emotional detachment from what's going on? Whether that means detachment from, and I will go macro and micro here. So at the macro level, we've got political stuff going on and everybody's very kind of enraged and outraged and got very strong opinions. And then at the micro level, we've got the fear and greed index every day. And we've got the emotions of watching that little,
the green and the red, and
the green and the red, you know, the candles and the 5 minutes, you know. I mean, there's something just insanely addictive about watching a 5-minute chart tick over. And that's, I mean, I always think of that as just the emotions of an entire market, like hundreds of thousands of people and bots, all just condensed into that one little 5-minute candle, you know, like hundreds of thousands of people. So do you find that from all that work you've done, you've got some detachment or ability to be a little bit more emotionally removed from the big noisy kind of culture wars and Twitterverse kind of heated discussions, but also at that day-to-day trading level?
I'd say I go both ways. I'd say I can get out of my emotions quicker. So I can still get wrapped up in stuff here and there, depending on, I don't know, wake up, have a bad day, sleep bad, see a good argument happening, dive into it, you know, join the punch up. But then I can often get out of it quickly as well. Like, hang on, what am I doing here? Am I just wasting time on this nothing argument, which means nothing? None of us know each other, and blah blah blah. And I'm probably talking to a computer. So I wouldn't say I float above it, but I definitely find myself able to get out of it quicker, or figure out what about it is triggering me. Like, why am I specifically annoyed about this thing? Is that reflecting something in me that I, you know, just need to think about a bit more, versus just, you know, rubbishing some other person or some other bot on the internet. And I think trading's actually been a big part of that, because I only got into the stocks and crypto about 2.5 years ago in Bali, when COVID hit, couldn't do the business, sat around for 6 months just waiting for something to change. It didn't. And so I thought, okay, I might get into this, because I've always been afraid of it. Dad always, you know, was afraid around the stock market, and that kind of fear soaked into me. But I was like, if he was dead right now, would I do this? And I was like, yes. I was like, well, he's not dead, but maybe I can do it anyway. And so that's what led me into it. But it was really interesting just seeing my emotions. And, you know, and it started with the stock market. I bought one Tesla stock at like $700 at the time, which, because of stock splits, it's probably only, I know, $200 is what I actually was. And I was just nervous.
Like around there now, isn't it?
Well, there was a stock split though. So
right. Yeah. Gotcha.
So now it's still the equivalent of like 3,500 or something. So back then it was 700 instead of 35. But I was still nervous as hell, like sweating on it. Bought this one thing, and then a month later I bought like 5 more. You know, just suddenly was hooked into it. But it's been interesting seeing my emotions around the money side of things, and trying to temper that out. And I think, like, we've both done Jason's course, a lot of that's helped me, and also just having the time in the market. Like, I've been watching stuff for 2.5 years now, so it's hard for me to sustain emotions of like this. It's like, oh no, I find myself seeing further and further back to really like zoom out, especially now. It's like good just to like be back here looking at, I don't look at the 5 minutes, I try and avoid it because I would get roped in, but you know, just looking at the 1 days, barely even the 4 hours, just so I'm like, just trying to get this big picture as much as I can. Because I can be volatile. I can get on the 1 hour and be like, what's going on here? Is it crashing down? Is it breaking down? Oh my God, I should have got in the other day when it was, you know, went from 19 to 22 and made a good trade. It's like, no, just relax. It's okay. So it's like I'm trying to do longer trading versus shorter trading. I find the shorter trading does make me more volatile. Even when I was doing the US stock market, I was doing some shorter trading there. That wears my body out more than if I just kind of sit back in a relaxed way, as if I'm sitting with a coffee. I don't drink coffee, but just sitting back, observing it all, I can make better decisions. And kind of like what you spoke about, like just zooming out, letting myself as best I can be above it, so that I can just quietly, consciously make some choices.
And it's hard. It's I find for all the influencers that are out there and great educators and teachers, it's still a very solo endeavor. And I find that a little discomforting, like just, you know, just I'm not an experienced trader. I'm not an experienced investor like you. I've absorbed a lot of messages of fear around this space, really related to kind of that part of your journey. And I had to kind of make that decision that I would go ahead regardless.
Yes.
But, you know, I'm married with a kid and all the responsibilities that come with that, and it's scary stuff, and you're up against people who've been in this market forever and who are deliberately out to get you money. For every winner there's a loser, isn't there? And so you just don't want to be on the losing end of that.
Yeah.
Too consistently. So, so where do you feel you're saying you're able to be a little bit more detached from those kind of the actions and the reactions of the market to some degree, and you're stepping back and doing a little bit more kind of relaxing and not getting caught up in it. So I'm curious, I feel like I've got a sense of your kind of where you've come from and where you might be now, albeit not terribly in depth. And you know, if we had all the time in the world, I'd want to delve further. But I'm curious as to at that big picture level, I've recently read The Fourth Turning. I'm reading The Sovereign Individual. I've just listened to a great interview about the network state, Balaji, whose surname I'm not going to get. And so I see some, and I actually just listened to another interview with Lynn Alden this morning on Breedlove's What Money Is show. So I get very interested in that macro. I don't know that it helps me in terms of day-to-day trading, but it's what I find myself drawn towards most, and I can't help myself kind of listening to that stuff. Yes. Do you have a sense of those macro cycles, or is that of interest to you? Or no?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's something that I think through doing the work that we've been doing, you know, with Jason and Michael, that's got me more into it, and I partly really connected with Michael on that because I find either I have a similar temperament to him or I identify more with him just as a temperament. And he's just a slow, steady person, deep voice, kind of, you know, just like this, which is how I am most of the time.
Yeah.
But he really, you know, has talked about the cycles and gone into all that esoteric stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating because he seems like such a technician, you know, just numbers. But he's like way out here as well.
And a lot of that is the kind of GAN influence.
Exactly.
But also the Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. So the Philip Anderson stuff of the 18.6-year cycles in property. So you've got those big pictures, but you've also got big GAN cycles as well that I think are kind of more in that 50-year range, aren't they? Or some of them. And then
and bigger than that. I think even Michael's talked about, you know, there's a few like 2,000 or 3,000 year kind of deals that go on as well.
I haven't heard
just
that
depending
stuff.
on how far you want to go. And so I'm at this stage, I'm bad at looking into any of those in a super deep way. It's more that I've got an awareness that those are like, I haven't read The Fourth Turning or listened to these things yet, but as soon as I've heard people talk about it and I get the summary, I'm just going to throw that into my picture of like, okay, that makes sense. You know, you got this, cool. I with those ones, I don't like to get too stuck on the detail just because it's like too much information in my head. It's like, okay, I know this is roughly going to happen. This is the rough time frame. With that knowledge, what am I doing now? And I mean, the 18.6 has been a brilliant one. That's kind of in between, you know, the GAN stuff. Like it's really narrowed it down to probably a better time frame for me, especially this next 5 years. It's like, cool, this is my action plan. I sold my house recently. That was part of the reason I came back to Australia, was to sell my house. I've got this big stash of cash. We're close to the bottom of the market. That's why I'm looking. There's longer entries I want to get in sometime soon and then ride up, because part of me is trying to secure my position. We spoke about that at the very beginning of like, you know, what am I doing this for? It's to secure my position so I can keep on with this accidental retirement and make it a bit more purposeful. That's just the space I'm at. So I've got the awareness of the big cycles, and I kind of accept them in the same way that when I said I kind of have this broad understanding of what God is and, you know, what's going on in the universe and the fact that I'm not keeping my heart beating. It's like, okay, cool. I kind of get that. I don't need to go into all the detail of that or the speculation of all that stuff. It's just like, I'm aware of it. How's that helping me now? What's that awareness? You know, what can I do with that awareness? And the 18.6 is a great one. I've got, you know, 5-ish years to ride this wave up. Get the hell out of Dodge and then start again. And so,
but you're selling a house now.
I've just sold it.
Just
Literally,
sold it.
yeah, it settled 3 weeks ago.
Will you so what are your thoughts around the kind of asset allocation at the moment then in terms
It's pretty much all going to go into crypto. I'll just ride the wave up, start with Bitcoin sometime in the next, few months, depending on where this bottom comes in, just start averaging down into it, ride the Bitcoin wave up, then the Ethereum, and then the alts and so on and so on. I know that, the alts do pop off here and there and you can get your 20, 30, 50%.
Yeah.
I'm not good at the short-term trading. Like it just wigs my brain out a bit too much to really be that focused. For whatever reason, I used to actually be good at that level of focus when I was in my photography business. But in the past 5 years, I think partly with the Bali lifestyle of just this relaxing kind of life that goes with nature, I'm not as good at just getting hyper focused. It just burns me out too quickly. So now I prefer the long approach. So I figure, okay, I can ride the Bitcoin wave, Ethereum wave, alts wave, maybe a few speculative pieces of crap right at the end of the cycle, and then get the hell out again. And probably do it, keep the base in, the Bitcoin, Ethereums, and then just trade with a small portion, like 10, 20% for those, extra spicy gains. And at least if I lose it, it's not that much. So,
does your photography mean that you look at a chart differently? Do you reckon you ever look at a chart as a work of art and see patterns that maybe the rest of us don't? Not necessarily.
I haven't thought about it. I don't know.
Because I always think maybe musicians look at charts differently from me. Like they would see like musical patterns in their harmonies. And I think, again, that's a bit of a GAN idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a funny one because, I've seen, Michael talk about the music thing, and I'm not a musician. I struggle with that, but I have watched, for whatever reason, musical videos where they were talking about how people's, what's the word? Oh, who uses auto-tune and who doesn't. So some musicians will sing and the computer locks their voice into a particular note, like tone or whatever it is. And so they're showing these bar graphs, line, like 8 lines. And as they're showing this, I'm like, God, that kind of looks like a chart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that actually was what got me into the music versus chart reading. Is like, and now I'm starting to see that more and more. Like even when Michael draws 8 lines, I'm like, hang on, that looks like a progression of notes, and singing going up and down. So I actually want to explore that more. As to whether the photography affects it, probably not, because the photography is even more organic. Like music does fit such a structure, and I guess light waves do, and I do understand light waves and how they fit structures, but in terms of the creative aspect of photography, I haven't related that to the charts yet, but now you've said it.
Hey,
I'm going to look for it. Yeah.
So you want to ride out these big kind of waves.
Yes.
And tell me about then how, so what I'm hearing at this stage is that Bitcoin is about money making. It's about setting you up. It's about following that wave. To the degree that we have a 4-year cycle, or that 4-year cycle is still intact, the expectation would be that, we might start to see some sort of, increase as we head into the all-time high, and then usually the next halving, which is 2024, and then all-time high is usually about a year after that.
Yeah.
Which will meet the peak of the supposedly the 18.6-year property cycle as well. So that's all going to kind of happen at once, and heaven only knows what kind of crash we might see the year after that.
Yeah.
So is there a part of you that also is hodling your Bitcoin for the long term, that feels that it ties into a bigger societal cycle, like to the degree that there's changes in society going on, in that kind of big picture background thinking that you've got going on?
Yeah.
Where does Bitcoin fit into that for you? Is there a part of it that is separate from just riding out the waves and profiting?
So I think from watching Jason and Michael, I've kind of separated my brain. I'll tell a short story which will relate directly to this. When I started my photography career, I had my creative ambitions, but I had to make money.
Yeah, yeah.
And those two can be hard to combine. And I went to a talk once where a photographer was presenting, and he said, you know, someone in his early life said that he could separate his money from his creativity and actually enjoy both more. And so he did that in his business. He'd have his artistic pursuits where he'd go off and make no money doing a stupid thing that would take hours and hours. And then he'd work with clients and just, you know, grind it out, shoot whatever they needed and make a bunch of cash. And that helped me in my business because I was doing a lot of our work was, you know, school photography, sports photography, events.
Hardly joyful.
Creatively dead. They're logistics exercises, but I did enjoy them. But I was like, okay, that's my money. And if I do stuff artistically, that's fine. I don't have to make money. If I do, great, but that's not why I'm doing it. Yeah. And so in this conversation, I'm kind of realizing I kind of see in terms of investing with Bitcoin and making the money off it, that predominantly is the money making activity because what I'd rather be doing with my actual time is, you know, doing traveling, which I love, doing photography, still pursuing my art in that sense. And potentially creating business out of that, you know, doing gallery shows and all that kind of thing, which I do have some experience with. But one is the foundation for the other.
Yeah.
Because at this stage, I don't want to have to worry about that being a profit-making exercise. I just enjoy it. You know, if I can make my money here and then do this with most of my time, life is good. So that's like I guess the narrow perspective. In terms of the bigger perspective, societal shift, I think Bitcoin is just part of the shift, but I'm still skeptical as to how much it will. Like there seems to be two forces at the moment of governments trying to get more control.
Yep.
And that's been part of the whole, you know, through COVID, we've just kind of seen that control thing get stronger and stronger. Yeah. But then there's opposing force of people trying to decentralize, push away from governments, you know, have their own autonomy, blah, blah, blah. I don't know who's going to win that battle. I can't.
No, I'm very, yeah.
So I'm not like with me investing in Bitcoin, it's not like I'm doing it because I'm trying to gain personal freedom, personal autonomy as much as I can. You know, if I've got a few $1 million and I can get a couple of passports in a couple of different countries so that I can move around and not be as subject to, you know, just my birth country of Australia or any of them, you know, if I can just move where the most freedom is, that's my ideal. But I can't quite predict.
What are the residency laws in Bali, just out of interest?
You can, so if you start a business there, which I did, you can easily get residency, but there's sort of stipulations around how much money you're meant to invest and things like that, which you can, theoretically, you're meant to invest about $100,000 in just whatever. They don't care what you do with it as long as you spend it, but you can kind of get around that as well and not necessarily have to do it. So it's just once you hang around for enough time, you figure those things out. But so I do have a investor residency there, so I can go in and out easily, which is good. But yeah, it'd be good to develop those. And in terms of where the world's going, I don't quite know, like even with the fourth turnings and things like that. It's like, I know at the moment we're kind of in the war period, evidently, like there's lots of conflict going on. I just don't know. I'm trying to figure out what that means for me, because I can't control the bigger picture of where the world's going. All I can control is where I am in it, and just secure myself in the best position. Because I think when I was younger, I used to be, I guess, more just supportive of like, oh, the government will look after us, it's all fine. I'm like, nowadays I don't delve into the conspiracy stuff too much here and there, but not too much. It's just like, okay, there's other people, they're trying to control stuff. That's fine, they've got reasons for it. They're trying to keep this whole big ship sailing.
Yep.
I'm on my little boat and I want to sail in my direction, not necessarily where they're taking the masses. I understand why they're doing it, it's fine, but I'm too independent now. You know, I've had my own business, I've traveled the world, I've got my own life, so I just want to be in control of my own thing as strongly and tightly as I can be. And I'll have to give up here and there.
This is a piece that a lot of Bitcoiners have in common, which is concerns about increased regulation, increased control.
Yep.
And whilst we can't do anything about that, we do want to protect ourselves and our families. I haven't even asked you, do you have family? Do you have kids? No. So it's really kind of looking after yourself and knowing that you've got the freedom to move around.
Correct.
As required.
And at some point, I do want to have a family. So part of this is really me prepping for
Yeah,
that. Like when I was younger, it was funny. I set myself up here and there. When I was younger, mum was hassling me, when I was 25, 26, when are you going to have kids? Like
right.
when I'm 50, mum. So just, back the truck up. And I said that just to get her to not hassle me, but that's kind of, I'm 40 now, and that's kind of where it's heading. Like I'm only just starting to feel ready for kids in terms of I've got a bunch of knowledge, have to pass something on. The only last piece I'd like to get is just this big stash of cash so that I can actually be an active parent, not a working parent where I'm away 12 hours of the day. I'd rather be around for it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So this ties in, that ties into my sort of broader picture as well of the next 10 years. Maybe my life will go in a family direction when I've, got my person
Yep.
to do that with. And
Nice.
just have that independence from, just being stuck from any government. Like I just want to have the freedom.
Well, it does bring a different thing into the equation though, because once you've got a little person around and they're going to school, I mean, unless you're willing to homeschool, which you may well be able to do and has become increasingly popular, obviously, all over the world. I mean, starting with the States, but certainly here in Australia, it seems to be growing. I'm not sure what the situation is in Europe, how wide, how common that is over there. So I tend to get a bit, maybe because I'm here with my thoughts and listening to the people that I listen to, I get pretty concerned about all of that. But I need to stay put for my son's sake. He's in year 8 at school. I need to ride it out at least till the end of high school, which is another sort of 4.5 years or so, counting down.
Perfect time.
And I get pretty worried about it. I get pretty worried about the levels of regulation. I get pretty worried about the lockdowns that we've seen and how quickly that could happen.
Yeah.
And some of that's to do with my background, and I've got a certain level of paranoia around all of that and kind of deep concern. So how do you feel you can best protect yourself in all of that?
Build resources. I mean, when I had my business, the amount of stuff that I could legally, mostly, just squeak away, like get away with, in terms of what I did with my business and my money and things like that was phenomenal. And because I just had big access to resource, I had a couple $1 million coming in every year. That gave me a lot of slosh in terms of what I could do with my money and resources and things like that. So it's now just personally building, but I had a bunch of staff, a bunch of responsibilities. So that kind of was the constraining factor. If I can build myself up personally to be at that level, and even through watching some of the people that we learn from, the more money they've got, they just, they want to go somewhere, boom, gone. Like they don't wait for permission. It's just like out of here. So it's just building myself to be as flexible as possible. Within, there's still constraints governing laws, all of those kind of things you get to deal with. But it's like, okay, this is the system. How can I work this thing to my advantage? It's kind of like people that don't have a business, and the ones that do, as soon as you have a business, you've got so much more flexibility in what you can do with your money and how you can move it. And if you understand the structures versus someone that's just a wage earner, like if you're earning $100,000 a year as a wage earner, you can't do anything about tax. You're really locked into it. As soon as you got a business, even if you bring in the same $100,000, there's a lot that you can do to claw back that tax legally. And so it's like, I just want to understand the systems, understand the restrictions, and then just carve my path straight through the middle of where I want to go, knowing all of that. And knowing that it could get tighter and tighter, but that's the Bitcoin thing. It's like if I can throw a ton of money on a hardware wallet and then just go to Bali or go to wherever, they can't stop me. Whereas if I want to even send $10,001 to Bali, they're gonna know about it. They're gonna be wondering why. So
you seem to, but you have a lot of faith in Bitcoin at 2 levels. One that I've heard, one is you said, I want to ride up the Bitcoin wave, then the Ethereum, then the alts, etc. So there's a clear faith that it will do that. That the 4-year cycle isn't broken, or there will be another cycle, there will be another bull run, that there will be broader adoption
Yeah.
And then there's also faith that you'll be able to take it out of the country and it will have value.
Yeah.
And it will be useful.
Well, yes and no, because I still see, in terms of the first part, I'm basing that on the 18.6. Like, Bitcoin's not dead. If it was going to go to zero now, probably would have, or it would have capitulated harder and things like that. So I was like, okay, chances are there is, regardless of adoption, there's just enough people focused on it, enough emotional energy being put into it, that those emotions are likely to keep riding up with this sort of last wave of the 18.6. So I've got the faith in the emotions, not so much in the tech. And the tech is indicating that it's not, the arse isn't dropping out of it. It's still at 20 grand. It's not even hit 10 grand, that kind of thing. If it went below 10 grand, then I'd go, okay, maybe the 4-year thing's broken, but it doesn't seem that way currently. So there's that part of it. In terms of, what was the second half again? The will be worth something. I don't necessarily assume. I assume that we'll follow the pump up that I believe is likely to occur with this 18.6. Just that general trend up. As soon as that crashes, I deem it as being worth nothing, but fiat will still be around. So I see myself just selling everything back into fiat in whatever country I'm in, as best I can. If I have to distribute or do things, then I'll get it all out as best I can, and that's when I'd probably go back into land. If I finally figured out a place I actually want to live and be in one spot, like the situation you're in now, figure out which country that's going to be, or maybe I'll have a couple. Find a plot of land here, plot of land there, raise my kids, and ride the next wave.
So it really is about Bitcoin for you is an asset class, and it's you see it as correlated with some other asset classes and counter cyclical to other asset classes. What's your take on that?
I think it's just it seems like it's becoming more and more part of the mix. Like, it's got its own cycle, yes, like it's 4-year thing, but it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just kind of flowing up with the trend. It's still kind of a tech stock, and we saw that, as soon as COVID started unwinding, tech started crashing, which tied into this part of the 18.6-year cycle. It's like, okay, it's predominantly tech stock with a slight little bits of other flavor in it. So I think it's still got the opportunity to ride up, and it's still young and volatile. It's like the asset, your golds and things like that just move so slowly. Even with gold, maybe it will double in the next 5 or 6 years. Well, kind of thing. Whereas with your Bitcoin, you got 5 to 10x kind of thing. So I just see it, you got your bigger stuff that just moves a lot slower, but it's consistent. And you've got your smaller volatile stuff like this, which is going to go wildly up and down even over the next 5 years. But I'm okay with that. Like, I can handle that. But I don't get too caught up in the narrative of, like, is Bitcoin going to change the world? Is it going to get us away from all governments? Blah, blah, blah. The people that are running things, without any conspiracies, just the people that have the most money in the world aren't threatened by Bitcoin. They've just gone, oh, this is something new. Great, let's integrate it. Let's, make it work for us, because they can. So they're already making it work for them, and that's fine. Like, they're playing a bigger game than what we are. So I don't get into the idea of, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize the world or change everything. No, it's just another step in the thing. But the people that are smart and know how to run the biggest multinational corporations aren't going to get phased by it. Like, they're just, that's why Berkshire and Warren Buffett doesn't worry about it. His company is worth half probably now, because we've dropped so far. His whole company is worth the same as the whole of crypto. So it's like, what's he worried about?
And I think at his age, he's got nothing to prove, and he's got no reason to engage with a new technology.
And some of the investors I've followed, it seems like, they're happy if they're a 60-something hedge fund manager. They're happy with 5 to 6% a year, because their primary job at that stage is to not lose money and to beat inflation. Like, that's all they're up to. When you're younger, you can be more risk adverse. You can just develop it quickly build it up. But once you build it up to a certain level, like if I had $5 million, it's like, do I want to throw it all in on black and, have a 50-50 chance of whether I make money, or do I just want to, get my 5 or 10% per year and just live off that?
Do you have people that you chat with about all of this?
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends here in Perth. I've got some in Bali, some on the East Coast, and so I just kind of bounce off different people. One friend in Canada randomly.
Do you help each other with trading? Do you run kind of other kind of concepts by each other much?
A lot of it can just be either talking about the day-to-day of, okay, something, breaking up, breaking down, that kind of thing, or it can just be like that zooming out thing, just like, okay, kind of where are we at the moment in terms of the bigger picture?
Yep.
It's when crypto went from 30 to 20 just recently. Oh, sorry, Bitcoin went from 30 to 20 recently. I was, through conversations with them, through watching the stuff that we watch, I was kind of anticipating that, because part of me, the emotional part of me really was like 30 grand. Should buy some, it's a good price. I was like, but the other part of me that had zoomed out and was talking to my friends that also zoomed out was like, just wait. It's like, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And then suddenly, boom. And I had one of my friends did buy in at 29. They're like, I got 29. Literally the next day, 27, 26, 25. Like, that's when we had that week of just crap.
Yeah.
And so, like, I felt good in that moment. It's like, okay, I did what felt right, which was to zoom out, wait, because that's when I got the money from my bank. So I was right there with a ton of money from my house, like just ready to throw it all in black. And it was like, just wait. Like, this is coming down. So, and I'm still in that position. Even at 20, I'm still like, I can start DCAing now because it's got a low risk to the downside. But if I could just do it at 14 grand.
I know. I've got to say,
the leverage is so
the last
much
few
better.
days, because I've got a little bit of cash there just from some work I've done recently, and I'm going, hold off. There's nothing in that chart that looks like it's breaking the downtrend, So hold off. It's hard just being patient. Yes. Like, it sounds ridiculous that it should be hard to be patient, but
it is. I mean, it's so exciting to trade and to buy things. Like, even when that was one bad habit I developed in business, because I had so much access to money. I'd buy a lot of just random shit.
Yeah.
Just because it feels nice to buy something. But now that I'm dealing with more limited resources, it's been good developing patience around these things, because most times, I'd say 80% of the time, where I just like emotional, like, I got to get in now.
You feel like I'm feeling like we should probably be moving towards some kind of wind up, but there's a question kind of playing in the back of my mind around intuition. Again, maybe this goes back to the ayahuasca thing. It's about age. It's about and intuition can be twofold. There's some sort of innate intuition about life, and then there's also intuition that comes from experience. You've been in the markets for 2.5 years now. You've been watching charts pretty closely, and you build up a feel for the market over time.
Yeah.
So, and I do want to kind of maybe merge those in together. I don't want to just take the experience intuition. I also want to talk about just if there's some sort of sixth sense intuition. Does that play a role for you, either in terms of long-term investing and or trading? Do you trust, you said very early in the conversation, out of that very first personal development course that you did, that it gave you a sense of, I'm at now, everything I've experienced has led me to where I am. So is there a sense of trust or faith in life to take you to where you want to be?
Yeah, the way I like when you're talking about experience versus this, which is a bit indefinable. The way, if I had to define it, the way I'd say would be intuition from experience in terms of recognizing patterns. Like in my photography business, school photography, 15 years, I could watch a shoot playing out. If I just if my staff are doing a shoot and I walked in the middle of a day to this thing going on, I could just stare at it for about 20 seconds, go, okay, I can see what's happening here. We need to adjust this, do that, and it's all going to smooth out and we'll be on schedule kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was the experiential pattern recognition. It's like, I've seen this pattern before, I've seen this pattern, I've seen it like 1,000 times now.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we just do this, and I've also tweaked it 1,000 times, if we just do this, it should all work out this way. I think the more esoteric intuition is kind of a pattern recognition, but doesn't necessarily have to come from experience. Like with this, you know, as soon as I heard a tiny bit about the 80-year cycle and things like that, on the 18.6, it's like, I haven't been around for an 18.6-year cycle. I haven't, you know, presently paid attention to it, but now I've got that tiny bit of knowledge that, okay, it exists. Great, let's assume it exists and just see how it plays out. And you can sort of look back at history. In terms of even bigger than that, when you're looking at life patterns, you're always going to go summer, winter, you know, spring, autumn. I'd said that in the wrong order, but those cycles just kind of exist. So it's like, if I can just accept that they exist and go, well, how does that affect what I'm about to do? Like for me, that's kind of the intuition of like, okay, where does it feel like I'm in this whole big picture at the moment? And like tune into that, like, you know, I've got my emotions of like, it could go up, could go down, what am I going to do? But it's just like, hang on, just where does it feel like in a bigger picture, as far out as I can, where does it feel like? It feels like weight. Like that's all it feels like at this stage. So it's zooming out as far as I can from the you know, watching an ant walking onto the ground, or, you know, walking its little path, to really zooming out and going, oh, okay, there's a whole stream of ants and they just happen to be heading in that direction. It's like, I'm not watching an individual creator talk about their tiny little detail of something they're worried about. It's just like, no, just let me get out and watch this pattern. And therefrom, I guess the intuition can come up without the experience. I'm just kind of trying to watch something, and then just feel it out, you know, from what I'm seeing, what's going to happen. I'd say that's different to the experiential thing.
Yes, it is. It is, because you haven't had the experience, but you're sensing and you're feeling that it's there, and it's a sense based on everything you're seeing and hearing around you.
I guess I've just got the experience of, I know that if I look at the pattern of something, that will guide me. So it's like, okay, focus on what's the pattern here. Is there a pattern that I can discern? If I can, then that's, you know, that guides the intuition.
So how does this feel, for maybe a final question? What's your meaning of life, and how does Bitcoin fit into it?
Just one of those easy ones. Bitcoin for me is more, currently I still see it as a means to an end. Like with all the learning that we've been doing, it's like, it's not my highest value. I'm not like, you know, a trader that's thinking about every single day and wants to be talking about every single day. That's how I was and kind of am with photography. I can talk about that a lot. So for me, it's more this, you know, separating that income versus passion or expression. So it's like, this is something that helps me do more of that. And I do enjoy this enough to do it. You know, I'm not fixing cars or whatever, you know, that stuff I wouldn't enjoy. I do enjoy this, but it's a means to an end to efficiently be able to do more of that, because I don't want to just, you know, earn 80 grand a year, 100 grand a year doing whatever, working 12-hour days. Like, that sucks. I'd rather self-express more, do more creativity. I'm in the fortunate position to be able to do that compared to other people, but because I'm in that position, I'm going to leverage the shit out of it. And help myself and help people along the way. Meaning of life, you know, just enjoy it. Like, we don't know what came before this. We don't know what comes after this. I'm just going to enjoy my collection of atoms for the moment while they stay together as best I can. Try not to take it too seriously.
I know, right? It's very easy to get caught up in it, hey?
Yeah.
Well,
it really is.
You know, things can go wrong. There's high risks involved along the way.
Yeah. I mean, part of that question, when I said earlier, you know, if my father was dead, would I do this thing? I kind of asked my question in terms, if there's something I'm having a doubt about, great, I've got a doubt, but I want to do it. What's the fear? Does the fear relate to someone or something? If that thing didn't exist or that person didn't exist, would I do it? Yes, cool. I guess that's an intuition thing. It's just like, if I feel that I want to follow this path, see where it leads. And I've got lots of stories which I won't share now of that, but there have been certain times in my life where I've just followed an interest just because I want to follow the interest, and it's led me in beautiful directions. Actually, I will finish with this. The reason I sold my business at year 10 in the business, I was already thinking of getting out, but I had an intuition then of like, I think I need to stick with this because whatever problems I'm not enjoying now, I'm going to run into them again with my next thing. So I might as well stick with this business I know, face those problems, grow, and at least I know this business. So it's safer than trying to do it with another one. So I stuck through that. But then I met a new friend. I made a new friend who at year 14 challenged me on it and said, hey, you've talked about getting out of your business. I was like, yeah. And they said, but you haven't. And I was like, yeah. And they said, I think it's time. And I didn't have anything to like push back on with that. Like I'd finally hit it. I was like, I think you're right. Within 3 months, the business was sold. Like I was just out of there because it was just following that intuition of like, yep, you're right. Yes, I need to be doing other things in life. Fine.
There's also something in there about, you know, the stars aligned, it was meant to be, it felt right, it happened. You know, there is something about.
I had the right person ask the right question at the right time.
Yeah.
But I could have gone, oh no, but risks, but this, but I was like, no, it actually feels time.
Yeah.
And because it felt time and I just committed to that, I was like, yeah. I spoke to one of my employees, my operations manager, and said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. 2 weeks later, he came back and said, hey, I actually want to buy it from you. I was like, amazing, let's do it. And so, yeah, within a month we signed the paperwork, and then 2 months later he officially took over.
I wonder if that, I've seen that in my life too. I've seen that play out. I wonder if it goes on at a collective level as much as at the individual level. I'm just musing out loud. You reckon 100%. There's an element of something's just, you know, like I feel that, I sense that like this was meant to be in my life at that time, or I feel something very, you know, strongly, and it'll usually be in my work life that I need to go in this direction. And then it just suddenly happens incredibly quickly.
Definitely. Well, I think that's what happens. I mean, you can't see that in politics, and probably a bit at the moment of like, why is that person elected now? Why are these people taking that action now?
Yeah.
And what's the resistance? It's just these kind of big ideas being worked out on a collective basis, where you do get individual casualties and individual successes, but it's like on a big picture basis, like everyone as a group is trying to figure this idea out.
Yeah.
And some people are trying it this way and some people are pushing that way, and at some point it will resolve and just go.
And I do think that's the benefit of a more democratic society over a communist society, because where communism often falls down is forcing, you know, is trying to force with limited knowledge. Whereas when you've got an entire, and I don't know even if it's democracy or whether it's capitalism or whether it's the combination of both, but when you've got all of those people inputting with all of those ideas, and as we were talking about before, and it all kind of conglomerates. Like we were talking about a single candle before, but that plays out with a single policy that ultimately ends up getting decided by all these players across, you know, that culminates in this particular.
I mean, you get that between certain countries, like every different country is running their own system. So that's kind of testing out ideas on that level. But even like in the US, they've got their 50 states, and their whole structure is based on that the state is the most important thing, and the federal government just happens to facilitate, you know, stuff between the states. And so each of those states is an experiment. You know, they've got the big issue at the moment that the federal government said, okay, we're not dealing with this anymore. The states it's your decision. So now you've got 50 different experiments to figure out what's going to work best. And at some point it may shift again where it's like, okay, they all kind of reach a consensus and start acting in sync with each other. But even if they don't, like you can move around the states to find somewhere better. And that's, you know, when I'm zooming out in my life, I'm like, okay, I don't like any of the states of Australia, really. So I was like, okay, which country do I like best? Which one has the most favourable laws that suit me?
Who's winning out for you at the moment? Who do you?
Even Indonesia, like with Bali, it's still, there's certain things I don't like. I'm afraid of Mexico, which means I probably need to go there, but I think they've been doing reasonably.
Oh, there's someone I can introduce you to around Mexico.
Amazing.
In fact, I may be interviewing him, and he's quite well known in this space. So
Beautiful.
And he moved there from Australia.
Nice.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
films Mexico, tiny bits of South America like Costa Rica, and that aren't too bad. UK specifically at the moment, who knows if that will change. Like I like what they're up to specifically right now.
See, I keep thinking about this. There's no perfect place in the world that gives you that level of kind of freedom that I
enjoy.
would like.
Yeah.
But also some sense of stability or
and that's why I like the idea of having maybe 2 or 3 places that I can get to.
Yeah.
So depending on what mood I'm in or what mood the country's in, I can move.
Yeah.
So I've got almost no stuff in my life. Like I've moved around so much that I've got like 8 boxes at my parents' house and that's it. Otherwise I'm good with a suitcase or 2.
Really minimalist. There's a lot of advantage in traveling light, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like a lovely conversation. I feel like there's many places I would have liked to have kind of gone down deeper. And I'm going to have to kind of feel this out in time and go, do I try to manage the time like this, or do I allow myself to kind of go, there are a number of different spots along the way that were along your timeline, but then sort of, kind of philosophically that I would have liked to explore more. But I might just kind of chat a little bit more after after I finish the recording. So I'm going to finish up the recording on that note. And if you wouldn't mind just staying on for a couple of minutes after. But thank you, David. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being my first, so to speak.
No problem.
On Bitcoin People, and I hope that whoever's watching has enjoyed listening to you, because I have really enjoyed learning a bit about you and your life and the way that you look at the world. So I'm going to finish up the recording there, and we will chat further outside of this space. Okay, holding fire. Cheers for now. Bye.